She told her roommate about you, not your name, not what you looked like, not what you do for a living. She described a single question you asked her, word for word, because she couldn't stop thinking about it 3 days later. Pause. That's not a fantasy. That's what happens when a man asks the right question at the right moment. And tonight, I'm going to give you 7 of them. But first, I need to tell you about a guy named Marcus, because what happened to him on a random Tuesday in October is the reason this video exists. Marcus is 31, graphic designer, lives in Denver. 6 months ago, he walked out of a 4-year relationship, and for the first time since his mid 20s, he's sitting across from a woman he doesn't know in a coffee shop on a first date with absolutely no idea what to say. Pause. He's been rehearsing in his head for 20 minutes. Career highlights, travel stories, that one funny thing that happened at a concert, and his whole playbook is performance. And he knows it. He can feel himself doing it, that thing where you're talking, but also watching yourself talk, grading your own delivery in real time. Now, his older brother David, 35, divorced, living in Austin, would tell him to lean in. Talk about your job, make her laugh, buy her a second coffee before she asks. David's playbook has a lot of confidence in it and very little curiosity. It got him a marriage that lasted 3 years and ended with his wife telling him she'd felt alone the entire time. So Marcus is sitting there mid-date and something in him just breaks from the script. He doesn't tell another polished story. He asks her something he's genuinely wondering. And what happens next changes everything about how he thinks about connection. Pause. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what Marcus asked, why it worked on a level most men never access, and you'll have all 7 questions mapped out so you can use them yourself, not as tricks, not as pickup lines, as keys to the kind of conversation a woman replays in her mind long after it's over. And the part that's going to surprise you most? It's not question 7 that gets her. It's what happens when you ask question 4, but we'll get there. Here's what Marcus didn't know at the time. The woman sitting across from him, her name's Priya, 28, UX researcher. She'd been on 11 first dates in the past 4 months. 11. Every single one followed the same invisible script. He talks about himself. She nods. He asks what she does. She answers. He tells a story designed to impress her. She laughs politely. By the end of it, she feels like she just sat through a job interview where she wasn't even the one being hired. So when Marcus puts down his coffee and says, totally unscripted, "Can I ask you something kind of random?" And she says, sure. And he goes, "What's something you believed really strongly, like 5 years ago, that you don't believe anymore?" Pause. Priya doesn't answer right away. She blinks. She tilts her head slightly. And Marcus almost panics because he thinks he's made it weird. But what's actually happening is something a psychologist named Arthur Aron documented in a 1997 study at Stony Brook University. Aaron found that when 2 strangers exchanged personally meaningful questions instead of small talk, they generated closeness that rivaled relationships built over months. Not because the questions were clever, because they required genuine self-reflection from the person answering. And that reflection creates a feeling of being deeply seen. That's question 1. What's something you believed strongly 5 years ago that you don't believe anymore? And the reason it works isn't the words themselves. It's that you're telling her, without saying it directly, "I'm not interested in the version of you that everyone else gets. I want the version that's been shaped by real life." Priya told Marcus she used to believe she needed to be in a relationship to be happy. Said it quietly, almost like she was admitting something. And Marcus didn't jump in with his own answer. He just let the silence sit there. That silence, that willingness to not fill the space, told her more about him than any story ever could. Pause. But that was just the surface question. The ones that come next go somewhere most men are afraid to take a conversation. Question 2 is the one that shifts the energy. When do you feel most like yourself? Pause. Not, what do you do for fun? Not, what are your hobbies? When do you feel most like yourself? That distinction matters because you're not asking about activities. You're asking about identity. You're asking her to locate the version of herself that exists when nobody's watching, when she's not performing for Instagram, or networking at a work happy hour, or being the responsible one in her friend group. When Marcus asked Priya this, she paused even longer than the first time. Then she laughed a little and said, "Honestly, 3 in the morning when I'm reorganizing my Spotify playlists." And that tiny admission, that silly, private, specific thing, cracked the whole date open because she'd just shown him something real, something she doesn't put on dating profiles. Now, here's where it goes deeper. Question 3. If absolutely nothing was stopping you, no money problems, no fear, no judgment from anyone, what would you be doing with your life right now? This is what psychologists call a permission question. You're handing someone a blank canvas and saying, "Show me what's underneath all the compromises." Dr. Kenan Sheldon's research on self concordance at the University of Missouri found that when people articulate their authentic goals out loud to someone who's genuinely listening, it activates the same neural reward pathways as actually making progress on those goals. You're not just having a conversation, you're giving her a neurological experience of freedom. Pause. That's not a small thing. That's the reason she texts her friend about you later. Meanwhile, let's check in on David, Marcus's brother. Same week, different city. David's at a bar in Austin, buying a woman a drink she didn't ask for, telling her about his sales numbers from last quarter. She's smiling, she's nodding, and she's already mentally planning her exit. He asks her what she does. She says marketing. He says, "Oh, that's cool," and immediately pivots back to a story about himself. Pause. David isn't a bad guy. He's just running the only program he knows. Impress her, perform for her. Hope she's watching. And he has no idea that every word out of his mouth is pushing her further away because none of it makes her feel anything. Question 4. And this is the one I warned you about. What kind of connection do you think you actually deserve? Pause. Read that again in your mind. You're not asking what she wants, you're asking what she believes she deserves. And those are two very different things. Priya heard this question, and she went quiet for almost 10 seconds. Marcus told me later he almost apologized for asking. But then she looked up and said, "I don't think anyone's ever asked me that." Pause. That sentence, that exact sentence. That's the moment attraction shifts from "he seems nice" to "who is this person?" Because you just touched something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You asked her to examine her own sense of worth, not to judge it, just to say it out loud. Question 5 moves into territory that feels almost intimate, even though you're just talking. What's something you wish people understood about you that they usually don't? Everyone, and I mean everyone, walks around feeling misunderstood in some fundamental way. The confident woman who's actually terrified of vulnerability. The social one who's drained by every interaction. The one who seems like she has it all together but cries in the shower twice a week. When you ask this question, you're saying, "I know there's more to you than what people see, and I want to know what that is." Priya told Marcus that everyone assumes she's cold because she's quiet. But she's not cold. She's just careful about who gets her energy. And the fact that Marcus didn't try to fix that or reassure her, he just nodded. That was the moment she knew this date was different from every other one. Question 6. If you could go back and tell your younger self one thing, what would it be? Pause. This one is an emotional time machine. You're inviting her to look backward through her own life and speak to the version of herself that still exists somewhere in her memory. Her answer will tell you more about who she is than 6 months of casual dating ever could. Priya said she'd tell her 20-year-old self that being liked by everyone isn't the same thing as being loved by someone. And when she said it, her eyes got a little shiny. Not sad, just real. And Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not attraction exactly, connection. The kind that sits in your chest. Now here's where I need you to stay with me. Because this next part isn't about Marcus or Priya or David anymore. It's about you. Pause. Think about your last real conversation with a woman you were interested in, not the small talk. The moment where you had a chance to go deeper and you didn't. Maybe you asked her what she does and where she's from and what shows she's watching, and it all felt fine, but it also felt like nothing. Like two people going through motions that were already scripted before you sat down. Pause. That's not because you're bad at talking. It's because nobody ever modeled what genuine curiosity looks like in a conversation. Most of us grew up watching men perform for women in movies, on TV, in our own families. Dad tells jokes at the dinner table. Uncle Dave dominates every Thanksgiving conversation with his opinions. The message was always the same: be interesting, be impressive, take up space. Pause. And somewhere along the way, it never occurred to us to try the opposite, to get quiet, to get curious, to ask a question we don't already know the answer to and actually sit still long enough to hear what comes back. If you're recognizing yourself in this, that's not something to feel ashamed of. Honestly, it's something to respect about yourself. Because most guys will watch a video like this and think, yeah, other guys do that, not me. The fact that you're sitting with it, really sitting with it, means you're already operating at a different level than most. Pause. You don't need to overhaul your personality. You don't need to become some philosophical interrogator on your next date. You just need to care enough to ask one real question and be present enough to hear the answer. That's the whole game. Let me show you what this looks like in practice because knowing the questions is only half of it. How you ask them is everything. Let's go back to Marcus. 2 weeks after the coffee date with Priya, he's at a gym in Denver. He's resting between sets, and a woman next to him makes a joke about the terrible playlist overhead. They start talking. Old Marcus would have flexed, mentioned his marathon time, tried to be impressive. New Marcus laughs and, after a few minutes of easy conversation, says, okay, random question. What does freedom actually mean to you? Like, specifically. Pause. That's question 7. And the woman looks at him like he just spoke a different language. Then she says, honestly, freedom means not having to explain myself to anyone. And just like that, in the middle of a gym, between sets, two strangers are having a conversation that actually matters. Psychologists call this self-disclosure reciprocity, the principle that vulnerability invites vulnerability. Dr. James Pennebaker's research at the University of Texas found that when someone is given space to articulate a core personal value, they form a measurable emotional bond with whoever facilitated that space. Marcus didn't plan it. He just asked because he genuinely wanted to know, and that's strategy 1. Ask the question because you actually care about the answer, not because you're running a technique. Women can feel the difference in about 3 seconds. Strategy 2. Let's go to Priya's world for a second. She's at her office in Chicago in a break room, and a coworker she's been casually interested in sits down. He asks how her weekend was. She says, good. Normal script. But then he pauses, looks at her, and says, what did you actually do that made you feel like yourself this weekend? Pause. That's question 2, repurposed for a totally different context. And Priya lights up because someone just upgraded a throwaway question into a real one. The strategy here is this: you don't need a special moment to ask a meaningful question. You can transform any ordinary exchange by replacing the autopilot version with the version that requires a real answer. Next time a coworker, a friend, a date says something generic, try this. Instead of, how's it going? Ask, what's been on your mind lately that you haven't told anyone? That one sentence changes everything. Strategy 3 takes us somewhere harder. David. Thanksgiving dinner. The whole family's there. He's sitting across from his ex-wife's empty chair, and his niece, who's 22 and just got out of a bad relationship, is being quiet. Old David would crack a joke, change the subject, keep things light. But David's been thinking about what Marcus told him. So instead, he leans over and says quietly, hey, what would you tell your younger self right now if you could? Pause. His niece stares at him for a second. Then she says, I'd tell her that being alone isn't the same thing as being lonely. And David feels something crack open in his own chest because he realizes that question isn't just for dates. It's for anyone you actually care about. The strategy is simple. These questions aren't romantic tools. They're human tools. Use them with your sister, your best friend, your dad, the person behind the counter who looks like they're having the worst day of their life. Connection isn't a category, it's a practice. Strategy 4. This one's about what happens after you ask. Marcus texts Priya a few days after their date. He could send the standard, had a great time, let's do it again. Instead, he types, I keep thinking about what you said about your 20-year-old self. It stuck with me. Pause. That's it. 11 words. No pressure. No agenda. Just proof that he was actually listening. And when Priya reads that text, sitting in bed at 11 at night, she feels something she hasn't felt in a long time. Seen. The strategy for you is this. After a real conversation, reference something specific she said. Not a compliment about her appearance. Something she revealed. Try. That thing you said about feeling misunderstood, I haven't stopped thinking about it. That sentence does more than 100 compliments ever could. So here's what happened to Marcus. He and Priya went on 4 more dates. Not because he dazzled her with stories or overwhelmed her with charm, because every time they talked, she felt like she could breathe, like she didn't have to perform, like someone was actually in the room with her, not just sitting across from her. Bon horse. David's still figuring it out. He called Marcus last week and said, I think I've been talking at women for 15 years. And Marcus said, yeah, me too, until I stopped. Here's the thing I want you to carry with you. The 7 questions, they matter. But what matters more is the man behind them. A man who's genuinely curious, a man who can sit in silence without needing to fill it, a man who asks not to impress but to understand. Pause. That's the man she thinks about at 2 in the morning. Not because he was the loudest in the room, because he was the only one who made her feel like she wasn't alone in it. So be honest with me. Which question from this video hit you differently? The one you'd never thought to ask someone else, or the one you wish someone had asked you? Drop a 1 or a 2 in the comments. I read every single one, and you'd be surprised how much those answers have in common. Now, everything I just described, the way these questions open someone up, there's one personality type that weaponizes this process. They ask all the right questions, they make you feel completely seen, and then they use everything you told them against you. Psychologists call it covert emotional extraction, and it's the most dangerous pattern I've ever covered. That's the next video. Don't miss it. If this gave you even one moment where something clicked, where you thought, that's why those conversations never went anywhere, hit subscribe. This channel breaks down the psychology behind connection in ways nobody else is going to tell you. Pause. Take care of yourselves.